Let's call the meeting to order. I think everybody's back in their seats. Welcome, Grant, and welcoming Leon, our auditor. So I declare the Audit and Risk and Finance Committee meeting ARF 24/1 open, and I welcome you all. Settle the spirit, clear the mind, prepare the body to achieve what needs to be achieved. Yes. Don't think we have any apologies. We're all here, so we can move on with that. Any declarations of interest needs to make? No. We don't have a public forum. We don't have any public excluded items. We'll move into confidential. No presentations. So I'm going to start off by moving a change of order. We're running a little bit later than expected, and so we have our auditors here for 10.4. So the recommendation is that we change the order and move to 10.4 now. Thank you. 10.4 is on page 56. So all those in favour of a change of order? Aye. Against? Carried. Excellent. Right. 10.4 then, over to Sarah.
Good morning. So the purpose of this report is to present to you the final audit management report that was worked through with Audit New Zealand and ourselves. So what we've done since then is come together with Leon and his team to discuss everything in this report and an action plan going forward. So if there's any questions for either myself, Adele or Leon, please feel free.
Yes, Councillor Thwaites.
Not really a question, but it was a recurring theme reading through the report, just the way in the past we've treated land purchases and sales and that. And are you confident that we've sort of tidied that up now to?
Yes, so as a result of that point, we engaged with some tax providers, PwC, to get some advice around how we can improve that process going forward, and that is something that we have now put in place, so we have addressed that issue.
So you're happy there?
Yeah, we'll follow up on that recommendation during our next audit, but through discussions with management, it seems it's been tightened up.
Councillor Mary Bench.
CCO annual reports not been uploaded to Council's website within 1 month. That serious?
No, ma'am, it's not that serious. It is something we need to raise, and I can assure you I raised it to quite a few councils. So it's just something that falls through the cracks, and I understand it's now been fixed.
Councillor Henry.
This is a question from someone who doesn't pretend to know that they know financial statements and things. But, you know, over the years, we've seen a few of these, and there's always quite a bit to do. I'm pleased to see there's not I don't think there's anything urgent in there that I saw, but the necessary things are largely, are they things to do with, you know, requirements that have been placed down on us? Mainly, that's what I'm seeing.
Yes, no, I quite agree. So necessary is something we think you really should look at. And, you know, then management would consider what we propose in conjunction with council. And does it make sense, you know, if you also take into account value for money? Because you can't react on everything auditors recommend, because it may not be, you know, financially prudent to do so, which we quite understand. If there's anything urgent, that's a problem. That's a big problem that needs to be addressed. And if it's beneficial, that's exactly what it is.
Councillor Crawford.
Hi. Hey, just reading through this audit report. So, so I'm new on council, so this is my first term. So, in your report, I noticed a lot of things you picked up there. And one of the words on there was, if I go back to the page, was you identified a significant number of misstatements. Can you explain to me what that is, please?
Yeah, so misstatements is when we work through management's assessment and how they present things in the annual report, either financial or non-financial, and we don't agree with that. We then talk to management, and either they agree or we all agree we were wrong or they were wrong, and then they address those misstatements and correct them.
Okay, so That's those comments I've seen then when you've identified.
Yes.
So that question I want to ask from your experience, in councils, this type of, what you pick up and how the staff are operating, is that quite common to just, that there are those anomalies and they just need to be worked out? So there's nothing like alarming.
Oh,
As a governor, I'm just want to be reassured, that,
yeah.
because I run a business too, so, we'd want to
No, fair comment.
keep an eye on things. So, yeah.
I will definitely raise with you if I have serious concerns. But from my perspective, we do pick it up at all our audits, not only councils, companies and so on. Where I think, as auditors, you dig deep into things, not as deep as internal audit, but you still dig quite deep, because if I issue the wrong opinion, I will lose my job. So that is a good incentive for me to make sure that any misstatements are corrected, except those that are really trivial. And I think for your council, it's about 165,000 we don't really care about. Material is 3.3 million. So if we find errors above 3.3, we say to management, we really need to fix this up.
And just will comment on on Zoom. All right. Question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed page 63 talk about seeking approval to get additional fee recovery. Could you explain how much you're seeking for that, please?
That is currently with management, and I prefer to have that discussion with management first. That's okay.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Want to comment? No. Okay, Councillor Murray Bench.
Mine was sort of a similar question. How much are we spending at the moment on audit, and how much will it increase to?
Through the chair, so the fees are outlined on a 3-yearly basis, and so we presented the fee information back to council late last year. So the fees for the annual report to the end of June last year were 258,000. 258,000.
Remember when it was 80? Could I ask then, so how much do you expect it will go up?
This is just additional work that's required as part of this audit, and as we've just pointed out from Leon, those discussions will need to take place as to what drove it, and we haven't had a chance to have that conversation yet.
Councillor Joyce.
On page 64 of the agenda, we talk about a breakdown in communication. And I presume it's all happy now, but can we just get a little bit of information about what happened there? Lack of direction given to council staff by audit was our view on it, and then the audit view again talks about some of the issues there. But what was that about?
So that was a management comment, but I can comment on that, Councillor. So last year did not go well. It was not a good process, annual report process, and it wasn't a good audit process. Since then, and since we finalized this report, we had a really good debrief meeting with management and staff to work through what can be improved, not only on your side, also our side as well. I mean, we're not squeaky clean. And so I think that has been addressed, and how we catch up in future, how regularly that's been addressed, so that we don't have any breakdown in communication this year.
Sarah?
I'll just add to that. Thanks, Leon. So we did have a really good debrief internally and with the audit team, and what we're aiming to do going forward in order to mitigate any of those issues is around being really open about our internal audit plan and how that can fit in with Leon and his team, and just ensuring that those communication lines are really open.
I fully accept that obviously an audit can't be too friendly anyway, otherwise it's not really an audit, but yeah, thank you for that.
Do you want to talk about the new interface platform being bedded in as well?
Yeah, sure. So Audit New Zealand have implemented a new tool which should also help address some of those issues. It's called Audit Dashboard, and it's a web-based tool which allows us to communicate directly with audit I'd say kind of more in real time because we're not waiting on emails and there's multiple people from both sides that are always monitoring that dashboard, so that will be a big help as well. Yes, yeah.
And just through the chair, in addition to what Sarah's also talked about, we're introducing a new platform tool in the production of our annual report called Value Financials, which is a PwC tool, which means that the financial information flows through into the notes all together, and so it's not a separate process if we'd like to update one and update the other. And so Audit New Zealand are very pleased with that. So thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
Sorry, I just wanted to make the comment though, last year was a wee bit disruptive for the teams in terms of having our delays to the annual plan, which then had impacts onto the annual report. So when we consider everything as a whole, it was a challenging year for the team.
Grant before you. Councillor Daly.
Yeah, Leon, the fact that there were 9 drafts of the annual report provided during the course of the audit, how does that compare to other councils? Is it a normal process to just have draft after draft, and that allows you guys to get on with the work, I guess, does it?
Yeah, that's actually not a good look, nine drafts. I think we expect about 3 or so. So, and that is because of the misstatements we spoke about earlier, as they are found. And I think what happened last year was they were corrected. Some were not completely corrected, and they had to be redone. Yeah, so it's all to do with last year's whole process that didn't go well.
And just secondly, the management comment saying that part of the issue was that that issues raised by your team were in the final days of the audit and left a little bit of, didn't leave a lot of time to respond. So there's a bit of a two-way thing, like you said, I think.
It's definitely a two-way thing because things were raised late. Because everything, I think Adele already mentioned it, everything was late last year. So it's just normal that we pick up things late in the piece. So that's definitely something else that we're looking at for this year.
Councillor Henry. Right. Under you, Member Henderson. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be fair to say that since the sort of 2020 COVID and what I would say is there was a pretty systemic issue of capacity, auditor capacity at Audit New Zealand, and also since that time there's been some fairly considerable new regulatory and acts that councils needed to accommodate in terms of new audit focus. Would you find that other councils or the experience of Audit New Zealand over the last few years has been that they've not been the starting point, which is you like to come in on your first day of the audit and actually have that first draft annual report, which is your skeleton, and that is, and in this case, that should have been on the 11th of September. And would it be fair to say that that's been widespread, that they've been late from councils as a whole in relation to these issues that I've mentioned to you?
That's a good point because councils also have pressure on staff capacity.
Yes.
Because I deal in the Waikato quite a lot as well, and how they steal from each other is just scary. Between the little councils, or not, sorry, I shouldn't say little, the councils. And I think that's part of the problem, was capacity, then timing of. Our problem is also, we had a problem with staff. We mentioned this a while ago. Yeah. So we've now got the most staff we ever had in the organization, which is fantastic. Not so good for the countries we stole it from, But but they were also new. They were new to New Zealand. They were new to public sector New Zealand. and then local authority New Zealand. And, you know, I've started in New Zealand about 16 years ago. I know the learning curves. So we had to upskill these staff.
Yes.
And quite a few of them who were on this audit last year were also new,
Yeah.
and they had to be upskilled. So,
And this is my point, is that I
Yeah.
feel it really looks to me like there's been this perfect storm for councils, Audit New Zealand alike. It's a case of hoping how we get back to what we define as the new normal. And obviously for you, the perfect thing would be that this council is implementing the new dashboard. You're getting everything real time ahead of time, but you've got that first starting point of having at least a skeleton of a draft annual report to then be able to say, well, you know, nothing else is going to get, you know, we're not going to see a house of cards constantly being pushed out. So I'm hoping that that's going to be, from your perspective, you would be seeing that your issues are now resolved, i.e. the audit capacity and continuity.
Yep.
And I guess my question, Adele, for you would be, are you feeling quietly confident that we'll be ready for that starting point in terms of providing to Audit New Zealand that, you know, reasonably complete first draft annual report in time for them for when they're actually starting their final audit?
Through the chair, absolutely.
And,
No, we've certainly got we're implementing the new tool, as I said, through PwC. We also note that this year, because of our deferred long-term plan, we will be into the scenario of having our annual report reviewed and adopted after that point. But we're looking to get as much information through to audit with that clean draft in advance. So then they can do if they've got available capacity throughout the long-term plan deferrals, they can do that on a timely basis. So we're not sort of hitting, as Leon mentioned, sort of late timeframes just because of, you know, having that after the 30th of September. But certainly we've got everything in play, ready to go, and Sarah's done a great job.
Thank you. And I'm also just gratified to see that there are no reds here. There are no urgents, and there hasn't been, and there aren't any new, and that's really positive because I've seen a few of them out there.
Well done, team.
Yeah.
Councillor Scrooge.
Okay, there was just a note in regard to, on page 81, I think it was, in regard to dry weather sewage overflows. And while we've had occasionally reported weather event occurrences, other than perhaps, unless that's talking about breaks in the pipe, kati, I'm just wanting assurance that it's not so much a matter of events occurring, but the manner in which that's reported that's of concern. I'm hoping I'm correct in making that assumption.
I'm just wondering if Cedric got that question was just in relation to dry weather overflows. It says we recommend that council implement a robust review process of the underlying data supporting the reported results for the dry weather sewage overflow measure to ensure accurate reporting of events meeting the DIA definition. Our comment was that we will review against the defined measures.
Yep, I'll have to come back on that one, but yeah, it makes sense to me, but I'm happy to come back on that one. But we can discuss that one specifically in the workshop today on the treatment plants.
Right, no further questions. I had one for staff. In the management responses, I noticed a number of times the recurring phrase that new resources had been recruited or whatever. So that occurred over and over through the report. So how many extra staff did we have to put on to meet these requirements?
Either it was a replacement reserve for someone who'd left a role or a new role. So the new role is in relation to the financial development contributions, which we've discussed with council previously. And Peter is here today as our new risk and assurance manager, so some of those were in relation to that area.
Just replacements.
That's right.
Okay, all good. All right. Grant.
Yeah, just in relation to page 13, point 4.4 about the second-hand goods input tax credit. I was just wondering, is that something that can be retrospectively claimed, or is that lost?
Yes, it can be.
Thank you.
Councillor Henry.
Just back to what Adele said, and I think that we have had difficulty, people leaving and then recruiting, and there's not a pool that, sufficient pool to actually, and I wouldn't imagine that our institution is one that's experiencing that on their own. So I just acknowledge, I realise that has its complications as well. Can you just repeat? Do we have you've got a new staff member in here now, have you?
Yes, our risk and assurance manager. He can stand up. This is Peter. And he'll be talking to some of the later reports today.
We're very good at spotting new people, so welcome.
All right. I think we've exhausted the questions, so the recommendation is that the Finance Manager's report dated 27th of February 2024, titled Final Audit Management Report 2023, be received. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Henry. Councillor Coxhead. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you for your time here, Leon and Anton, and you are excused. All right, so we'll move back to Clint at 10.1 at the top of the billing. At the start, page 7.
Good morning, all. Nice to be back again. So just a quick overview. I believe the report's been received and read, but just a quick overview. We had pretty consistent performance through the quarter from an incident perspective, the severity of the incidents and also the behaviours from our staff undertaking the safety behaviours. We had no significant trends that were identifiable outside of the fact we had a few vehicle incidents reported. These were low in nature, low level in nature, no significant damage to the vehicles and no injuries because of those, but we did have a few near misses reported. And the prevalence of aggressive encounters from our people, from the members of the public, has also continued to reduce, which has been pleasing, but we'll continue to monitor that. But if there's any questions about the report, please go for it.
Yeah, just as I was reading this and just looking at our risk matrix, and then the aggressive customers rated as high, it would be interesting to know the components that made up the high in regard to frequency and impact.
Yeah, I mean, the frequency is because we have a lot of people in varying customer service, customer-facing roles, so the frequency is going to be, there's always going to be a possibility of that. And then the high nature of it was because of the outcomes, more of a mental health outcome, more so than physical is what we're finding. And so we've put in some things in place to try and mitigate some of that, but also just the general feel in the community seems to have improved from 6 months ago. And so we'll review that consistently, and we consider that will probably come down just because of the general vibe that's out there in the communities.
Just to follow on from that, is there descriptors sitting in behind the what rare, unlikely, possible, and then the catastrophic and moderate? Are there descriptors sitting behind that?
Yes, yeah. So the frequency is around timeframes, once every year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, etc. And then the severity is the outcome of that as well. So yes, there is.
Is it possible for us to have visibility over that?
Yep, I can't see why not.
Yep, great, thank you.
Councillor Henry?
This question may be not in your area, but the signs that are down around the harbour margins that are saying don't enter, don't eat shellfish, Are they placed there by council or regional council?
That would be regional, is my understanding, yeah, waterways.
No further questions. You've obviously done very well, answered everything. Well done. So we have a... Oh, sorry.
I'd like to pursue the question of staff at our front counter. What in fact are we doing to make sure that they are really safe behind that counter?
So there's a number of physical measures in terms of the barrier itself is one, but there's also a panic alarm button that they can use, which alerts other people to the business that there's an event. But there's a range of training programs that they go through as well about de-escalating, dealing with aggressive customers, how we interact, those communication methods, which are actually the most important things. If we can de-escalate it at the front, then we cannot have those come by. At this particular one, we've moved away from putting a security guard. We just don't have the same level of interactions that we do at some of the library centres where there's other people coming involved. But we can move to that measure if we please, but we've elected not to do that. But it's more around the training and upskilling our people to be able to identify those issues, be able to deal with the queries at the time rather than putting some aggravation around delays and these sorts of things. But then also the de-escalation has been the main things.
We were having security guards in our libraries. Are we still doing that?
We are at the moment. It's an ongoing review, but right now they are still in place, yes.
Is that the problem younger people or who?
There's no specific demographic. It ranges. We do have some younger people, we do have some older people as well. So it really depends on the nature of their visit and what they're going in there for and some of the previous experiences, I suppose. So there's no specific demographic that's involved in those.
It's something that never used to happen. So the fact that it does happen now is the worry, and how to get rid of it and have people be polite again.
Yeah, it is a very tough one. We're all finding it, I think, in all walks of life that things have changed. I think I have young kids. The accessibility of information these days is so much more than it was, and so I think with that comes a level of confidence. Whether that's what's portraying it, who knows? But yeah, there's a whole range of factors that contribute to it, and you're absolutely right, it is changing society-wide.
I think it's a societal change. It's a little bit above your pay grade, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt.
Councillor Henry.
My question is about something that's been going on for quite a while, and it's about, it's in the wellbeing area, but it's about rubbish at Waihi Beach and collection over the seasonal area. And this may not be in your area, but I'm wanting to know, we found information was conflicting. So what we were told and what was actually happening. And we found out that what we were told was not right, but what actually was happening was actually what was the deal. And it's no one's fault or anything, but it's somewhere along the line where the information's not getting through or the wrong information's got. So the question is,
safety.
In terms of that, do you play any role in that sort of thing within the organisation?
The short answer to that is no, but I am involved in those discussions operationally and with the contractor that runs that. So we do have frequent governance and operational meetings that I sit in on. But in terms of the communication and what's put out to the public, the short answer to that is no.
That comes through, because was wrong.
Yeah, so that's a solid waste thing. We can take that back to them and let them know.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we have been working with a contractor on their performance around emptying the bins and frequency, especially in that busy holiday period. I think there's two concerns there. One is the fact that the bins are probably not sized correctly in terms of load. So that's one thing, but I think there was a decision to reduce the size of the bins, which I can understand from a reduction in waste or waste minimisation perspective. So I think we need to relook at the bins. But a key one is contractor performance. So one of the big ones for us is we've met with the contractor, met with their management, discussed in terms of their performance, and essentially being direct, put them on notice in terms of either performing or moving on.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, it was the question, the misinformation, that was all.
Councillor Daly.
Clint, I've got one quick one. Do you notice any seasonal variations and incidents, like between summer and winter, for example? My second question is, in relation to the Te Puke Library, or I guess you could talk any of the other libraries as well, but the fact that we provide free Wi-Fi and we get, you know, a certain number of people hanging around just to use the Wi-Fi, has there been any incidents relating to staff intimidation using that service? The reason I'm asking is because the Te Puke Community Board just agreed to install public Wi-Fi at Jubilee Park, which is away from the library, and I'm wondering if that might contribute to better outcomes at the library.
Firstly, seasonality-wise, there's no real identifiable trends from a seasonal perspective. Bear in mind, I've been here for a year, so I have looked back on previous, but we are starting to improve our reporting. The Wi-Fi, I mean, it's a service that we provide to the community, so we're going to bring more people to our libraries because of that, which is what the aim of it is. We want to provide that service. Does it contribute to some? Potentially, but often, in fact, in Te Puke, there's often an ulterior motive. It's actually usually that prevalence of the AA is where most of the interaction comes, and that's more of a process thing as opposed to the availability of services.
Councillor Murray-Bench.
This morning, page 24 of our previous agenda, there was the issue of antisocial behaviour down at Te Puna Station Road, where we have a freedom camping area and behaviour is deteriorating. Is that the sort of area that you become involved in because it's safety, and who's responsible for ensuring that people are safe down there?
Yeah, it's not something that I'm directly involved in terms of creating, setting up, but certainly provide guidance to the teams that do facilitate that would fall in Tedit's area with the freedom camping areas, and regulatory as well with Alison in terms of managing that. So that the teams do come to me for support when they are facing those issues, but in terms of managing it, it's the teams themselves.
All right, let's move along.
Somebody needs to do something, Sue.
Yes, but it's not a health and safety one. Right. We have a recommendation on page 7 that we need to move. Thank you, Councillor Murray-Bench. Councillor Henry, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Clint. Moving on to page 15.
Good morning, all. My name is Peter Labushan. Thank you for the opportunity to present the reports for risk and assurance this morning. I will take it as read, but just highlight a few things, maybe not too many. There's been a few changes since the last report, but this report is basically to provide a committee with information on risk management and internal audit activities since the previous report. In that context, there's 3 areas where there was changes. The first one is the strategic risk register, some minor changes there, and also to the emerging risks, that's in there as well, and then the internal audit plan, this reflecting. Sorry, it's a bit closer. I'm not going to go too much into the detail, but I did highlight in point 5A till F, the high-level changes to the strategic risks. They also detailed in the appendix or attachment, and each one of those risks was what was changed. So with that, before I move on to internal audit, is there any questions with regard to those changes?
Any questions, Peter? Councillor Henry.
Why is the privacy health check coloured in red?
Okay, so what risk is that, if I may? No, it's not. Apologies, it's not.
Something you were concerned about.
Just through the chair. So this is what we were going to undertake as reviews. So that was still in play. That's right. So
Sorry, your page
just noting it
7.
was still in play at the time.
Needed to read that a bit more closely, didn't I?
Thank you.
My apologies. Here, page 7 is actually the internal audit plan. I'll talk to you next here. Thank you, Adele.
Councillor Joyce.
Just want to check I'm on the right item. We're now in 10.3, right? 10.2. Oh, okay, sorry. No, that's right. I'll save my thunder.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, if there's no questions on the strategic risk, I just briefly moved on to.
We've still got a couple of questions.
Oh, apologies.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the beginning, it talks about the reserves contract coming to an end. There's performance issues to sort prior to renewal. Can you just clarify when that contract comes to an end, please? Maybe one for Cedric, perhaps.
Probably a question for Cedric.
So the reserve contract comes to an end in August. So we have been working on that in terms of what the last right of renewal looked like. So it's a 3-year renewal. We have had advice on that, and the contractor does have a right, an outright right for another 3 years based on their performance. Yeah. So, but we are working through obviously a combination of things in terms of their performance, their resourcing, and other bits and pieces. So, but we will have that conversation with the contractor.
So it's not up for a new procurement process, should we say?
Not at this point, but we will have to have a review and go over that. But at the moment, they are entitled to that right of renewal by right.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dowley, did you have a question?
Just maybe asking for a comment about community sentiment in light of, the imminent rates rises. We've got quite a low risk factor. What's that?
What? It's getting a bit ahead of the game. We haven't decided on the rates rise yet, have we?
Well, I think people are hearing about rates increases across the country, and they'd be expecting something similar from us, I guess. But I'm just wondering if it's how much thought what sort of thought you've given to that.
Is there a question?
Oh, well, the staff prepare these reports, don't they?
Yeah, I can comment. It's just the residual rating or risk is fairly low, medium. Well, it's lower than medium, to be honest. It's revised up to medium because of the environment, the political environment changes, and the expectancy of what's the impact will be on the community. So there's the awareness, and that's why the risk is medium. Is it to answer your question?
Can't really expect too much.
Through the chair, I'll just add some further comment. Obviously, as we're developing the long-term plan, we're very cognizant of affordability in the community and rates rises, and that's why the community sentiment is important, and it is a consideration, which is a clear direction of council as well, which is why we've been asked to review all of our costs, as many councils around the country are. We are facing tough times. The world is changing in terms of the legislation with the government. We are looking at what that means to us, but we're also facing high inflation and interest costs. And impacts on many of our contracts as well. So there's a lot at play in terms of our considerations in this space, and it's certainly our focus.
Councillor Murray-Bench.
I want to go back to the contract with the reserves contract. And Cedric, you said that that they're entitled to renewal, but I note that you've got performance issues with them. So if they can't commit to reform, does that mean they don't get renewed?
There is a performance framework within the contract. However, although they have been performing poorly, and I think they got caught out by the flush, they haven't performed so poorly that it triggers the ability to not renew the contract. However, what I would say though, when they aren't performing, staff have been pretty proactive and have held money and have action through the right channels to get the work done.
All right.
Thanks, Chair. So the general theme I got was that the review has started to see a general lifting
Can you
of...
We'll just move this bit closer.
Oh, sorry.
No, because you're looking that way.
Oh, I do beg your pardon. That there's been a general rising of the residual risk areas in terms of most of the major risk factors. I look at growth and financial sustainability, risk 6, that's on page 28, I think, of your report. I guess it's good to have seen that this acknowledgement that the environment we're in has impacted on a number of these key risks, and we've lifted some of these target residual risk areas to something that's probably a lot more realistic. But in terms of risk 6, the growth and financial sustainability, is there a way that you can give this council a more intuitive feel to the materiality of change? And I'm thinking, for example, a 1% change in annual debt cost of funds, or a 1% change in inflation assumptions, two of which are massive drivers in relation to risk 6. And is there something that you can coordinate with management? I know that it's a really difficult thing to you can't input these things into the model, but you can kind of do a broad materiality check so that council gets a kind of feel for what that means in the best term possible, I guess. It's kind of outcomes in relation to LTPs and other.
Yeah, to the Chair, it's almost like forecasting the weather a bit here. There is the risks and into events happening or not happening. For example, the three water changes that we are waiting for again. Don't know what impact that's going to have on the growth and financial sustainability for the council, because, for example, we've got this going concern question there as well that possibly we have to reassess, and that can have a major impact on the council sustainability. It could be more than 1%, it could be 5%.
I'm sorry, you've misunderstood.
I'll have a go, but that's right. I think what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong really quickly so I don't go too far, is what you're looking for is a risk tolerance metric. Okay, cool. We haven't had those conversations, but I think it's a really, really good question. And what tolerances are okay for us, and maybe particular to the, probably more so to the financial one, right? If this happened, what would it mean for us and what we're really willing to accept? So yes, haven't had those conversations, but we can definitely have them. I think it's a really good point.
Thanks.
Okay.
Spot on. Thank you.
Just to add further to John's comments, in terms of our long term, we're obviously considering the sensitivity of some of our assumptions as well. And as you know, going in through the last long term plan, no one saw inflation hitting the numbers that it did during this period, and we had to have a higher than planned rates impact last year as a result. So we're obviously more mindful in that area, and we'll do more modelling just to test that. And we already have had that change come through from our Standard & Poor's ratings that were announced last week as well, so very mindful. In terms of how we'd manage risk, there are some mitigations in terms of our financial strategy about how we would respond if we came into a scenario, and so that is set out in our current LTP for 21 to 31, and we're reviewing our financial strategy around that aspect coming into the next long-term plan.
Right. All good. Okay, so we have a recommendation on page 15 there that risk assurance report be received. Thank you, Councillor Scrooger, Councillor Henry, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. And welcome to the team. Sarah, you're back up. So we're moving on to page 35.
Good morning again. So the purposes of this report is to provide a financial update for the period ending 31 December 2023, which is Q2, so halfway through the financial year. So what I'll do is go through some of the key highlights in the report and happy to take any questions afterwards. So overall, we're tracking behind in terms of our projected net surplus for the 6 months. We had a budget of $16 million surplus. It's currently sitting at 1.7 million, and I'll go through the further details of what's driving this. So if you refer to page 40, this gives you an overview of council's debt. So at the moment, our net debt is sitting at $78 million as at the end of Q2. This is tracking to be below full year forecast due to us anticipating our next rates instalment next month, which will drive up our cash, meaning that it's less likely that we're going to need to borrow anymore. Page 41 has the statement of comprehensive revenue and expense for council. Subsidies and grants are $12.8 million below year-to-date budget. There's two main drivers for this, one being the network maintenance renewal not continuing, and this has been brought in-house, as you know. This has had an impact of just over $6 million on the Wakakotahi subsidy claims. We anticipate we also will see less expenditure in relation to this due to this decision. There is also a planned budget of about $10 million for Omokoro structure plans, which have been identified as subsidies. We have not yet received any of those funds, and that's directly in relation to the capital program. Financial contributions are $1.4 million ahead of year-to-date budget, and this is mainly due to some larger consents being finalised in December. Fees and charges are $0.9 million behind year-to-date budget. This is mainly due to timing of receipts of invoicing, and regulatory activity as a whole has lower than year-to-date budget, and as highlighted by Alison, this is due to lower volumes of activity than expected. If we move on to the expenditure, so you'll see personnel costs are currently tracking to be ahead of budget year-to-date. There's a couple of reasons for that. One being that we have started to do monthly accruals on our staffing costs, which is a requirement by audit, which in the past we've only done annually. So I think it gives a bit of a clearer picture in terms of what we're accruing and able to track towards the end of the year. This will go up and down just with timing of number of weeks in the months, etc. Something else that we haven't done yet, which we will be doing as part of our year-end process, is identifying and capitalising of staff salaries where we can tag them to specific projects like Three Waters. And the other reason why we're tracking ahead is, once again, in relation to bringing the transportation contract in-house. While we will be over budget with our personnel costs, we are expecting to have lower expenditure tagged to that external contract that we did have. Finance costs, as expected, are lower than year-to-date budget due to lower planned borrowings. And our other expenditure is higher, mainly due to maintenance contract costs, particularly in wastewater and stormwater, and the unplanned repair of the Katikati outfall. Moving to page 50, so we have got high-level explanations as to where we've got variances in our CapEx. We have identified at this stage anything over $300,000 in variance and given explanations as to why. Reserves and facilities variances are mainly due to delays in planning and consents. Water supply delays are due to the timing of the reservoir, which is moving into the next financial year. Wastewater underspend is mainly due to Te Puke wastewater treatment plant and consenting requirements, as Cedric has spoken to. And stormwater and transportation underspends are both related to the Omokoro structure plan timing. If we now move to page 52, which is the balance sheet. Cash is tracking to be on budget for year end. As noted before, we're anticipating the second rates instalment next month, which will be just over $40 million, meaning we're less likely to need to borrow any more funds before year end. You'll note prepayments is higher than budget and last year, so that's just a timing thing in relation to our insurance prepayment, which we receive in November each year. And linked to my point around personnel costs, you'll see employee entitlements looks higher, and that's just to do with how we're accruing our staffing costs. And then if you refer to the Treasury report on pages 53 and 54, I'll just touch on that. So as previously discussed, we had the breach that we had identified, and we were working through a strategy in terms of mitigating that interest rate risk. As at the 31st of December, that breach was still present. We have since covered that breach, fixing in some new interest rate swaps in January. So that breach is no longer there at the moment. And then I just thought for a bit of clarity in relation to the graph on page 54, this is in relation to the interest rate projections, and I thought I'd just explain this a little bit more. So you'll see there's a light blue line, and it's called weighted average fixed rate including margin. And I thought it would be worthwhile touching on why there is a spike in that in 2029. So this takes into account the sizes of all of our loans and swaps and their individual rates. And what it does is work out a new blended interest rate based on all of those factors. So we actually have a $10 million rate swap coming off in August 2029, which is why that looks kind of funny. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Revenge.
Mike, please. Back on page 51. And Sir, I just always so concerned about Rangiuru and the business park. Its contribution is 7.4 behind budget due to consent delays. How far are we from getting that project really up and running? We desperately need industrial land. Where are we with it?
Through Mr. Chair, so are we talking about the treatment plant or the actual
Rangiuru Business Park.
Yeah, so I think that although there are some challenges with the treatment plant, and I guess with the consultant and the Tangata Whenua working group, we are still progressing steadily with the actual design with an anticipated completion date of 16th of April. From there, we will early procure the things like the UV, other specialised plants with long lead times. We've got someone reviewing the consent from iwi this week with anticipation that we'll get support and resolve any outstanding 92 questions from Regional Council. This will then enable us to start the earthworks. It is likely we will need to apply for a winter works consent. So although we are delayed, we are still pushing ahead with earthworks and other bits and pieces. So the challenge here for the team is really to get to find ways to pull the program back through smart and strategic procurement, and I guess being brutally honest, push the consultant a lot harder to deliver on their outputs.
So we can't sell a section out there until this is done?
Well, no, I think in terms of what if Quayside are anticipating getting 2 to 4, say in December, the plant that we are currently upgrading at the moment is catering for, I think, for 13,000. So they're not going to have the whole lot developed in one go. So there will initially be some time between what can be going to the existing plant, although there's some work to be done on that. But I'm confident that we will, from a program perspective, be able to service the Rangiuru Business Park by the time they open their first building.
In the timeline, Cedric, I didn't get that.
So they're initially looking at, my last discussion, 2 to 4, so basically for their stage 1 in December. I'm not sure in terms of what anchor tenant they've got at the moment or when they're anticipating having their first building active. In terms of us, we're looking at around sort of 26, 27 for the initial part for the treatment plant. However, we still have the existing plant operating while we're building the new plant as well.
Just to add and be clear, the interdependency between the Te Puke wastewater plant and development of the site at Rangiuru Business Park doesn't exist yet. So there is nothing we're doing in the wastewater space that is holding them up. They are on track per project with their the earthworks and the development that they're doing at the moment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's been so long and it's despairingly so slow.
It's a big project, and obviously that's their project to manage in terms of that progress. They're not, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school here, they're not without their own challenges in terms of funding. Having to pay, as we've spoken to previously, having to pay for all of the infrastructure up front when they're only got control over half of the land is incredibly onerous on them from a financial perspective. Having to pay for the Papamoa interchange by themselves without any contribution from Crown is incredibly onerous for them as well. They're facing obviously all the same issues that we face in these industries with rising costs, rising cost of capital. So they're trying to work through these issues for themselves as well. They're actively in the market looking for their first tenants, their anchor tenants, and who they're going to be. They won't talk about those because they're commercially sensitive, but they're working through those in terms of who their first tenant's going to be. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Cedric, they are actually on track at the moment per plan, I think, with their earthworks and where they're tracking.
Yeah, correct. I think that should be a good note in terms of they are on track with the interchange. I know that they've procured a lot of the internal works, the internal roading, utilities. So I think in terms of their project team, in terms of their output and what they're delivering, it's at a very high level, and I think they'd be pretty comfortable with where they are in program, and also where they landed in the market as well. So I think from a delivery perspective, they're doing really well.
Councillor Henry.
Looking at the papers that we've got today, I'm feeling very assured that we've got a very sound statement of financial position. And I don't think I can take it in this meeting, but I am very concerned about the projection going for 2024 when I look at, 30 million in variance to our capital expenditure by activity. And then all the other ones that you've explained. We've got the roading contract. We've now got new information about that, which is pretty scary, but anyway. And the other thing that I would like some more explanation about at some stage is on page 11 of your report, is the capital expenditure analysis about these things that are behind budget year to date. And lots of stuff like, why is it? And due delayed planning and consenting process, It's very concerning. So you're not going to be able to tell me today. I can't take it in, but I am feeling concerned.
And I'm not going to give you a complete answer to that today either, Councillor, but what we are working on is a bit more maturity around the capital expenditure reporting. Dale and Cedric have been working hard on this in terms of saying, well, where are each of these projects and where are we financially committed within a life cycle of the project, if you like. So if we take, we're supposed to spend $100 million in a year, as an example, how much of that is in design? How much of it is in procurement, how much of it is in contracted, and how much money is actually out the door, so that you can get a better picture of how that spend or plan to spend that money is actually tracking. So I think that'll be helpful for all of us, and that will be more mature for the next audit and risk meeting.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a number of questions and hopefully run through them reasonably quickly. The gross debt on page 40 seems to be 93.2, but 95 on page 53. Can you explain what that difference was, please?
What page was that?
On page 40, it's 93.2, and on page 53, it's 95.
So if you're looking at page 52, it'll be your 78,200 plus your 15.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Page 52. So you've got your current and non-current borrowing. So you've got 78,200 non-current and 15,000 current.
No, I was looking at page 53, which is the the Treasury funding debt says debt 95, total drawn debt.
Okay, that comes from our Treasury advisors, so I'll check that.
So
The 95 comes from our Treasury advisors report, so I'll
Right.
just check that they've got the most up-to-date information.
Right, okay, thank you. Next question, and it's just two together really. I mean, I think we've spoken briefly about there's a chronic shortfall with our CapEx, and this year, it seems to be there's good weather, we don't have COVID, supply chain issues aren't apparent to me, but there may be some behind the scenes, and I'm just wondering how we can fix that, but also noting on page 50 that there seem to be persistent delays in planning and consent, and whether that comes down to better predicting those delays, and are we always optimistic about how quickly we can get those consents? So it seems to be we're giving ourselves a rather tough target with CapEx and then always failing to meet it. So I don't know if you've got a good answer for that one.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, I think you're completely right. I think the challenge for us is when we start the project. So the problem is, I think what we've had a history of, we're starting the project too late. So we're starting it in July, sometimes September. So not allowing us enough time to do robust planning. So what we have done using the 24-25 construction program is that we're confirming our procurement strategies now with the intention that all those projects are in train within the next month or two. So basically the planning consent happens well in advance so that we're procuring in June, July, so when the good weather comes along, we can actively do the work, so actually run a traditional process. But it also gives us enough time when we run into issues, whether it's consenting or engagement, we have enough time to actually mitigate those, not during the actual delivery season. What we're also doing is introducing better financial tracking and forecasting, so looking at how do we track our projects monthly, from a forecasting and cash flow perspective, and also how do we track those key risks, and then also what controls do we have over the actual capital program. So if you take the 5 activities we have, using road transportation as an example, that will have a project control group, which potentially would be chaired by, say, me and Adele, and then the say Cullen would bring his capital program up, and we would basically test that and say, well, how are you tracking our program? Are there any issues that need to be resolved? So it's driving another layer of commitment within the team, but it's also making sure that we resource properly. Our challenge is that that we probably a bit too optimistic in terms of what we can deliver. So we have a lot of positive and proactive staff who just want to deliver everything. But what we need to do is really look at our resourcing and say, well, actually, we can't deliver all of that. We may need to get some external consultants, either push projects out. So what we're doing is implementing that program management approach to our programs well in advance of starting the season to drive that better outcome, which I'm confident will see us performing far better in terms of our underspends and program.
Thank you, Cedric. And last question I have is probably more for Sarah, I guess, but on page 54, it talks about the focus is now on the quantum and speed of OCR cuts in mid-24. Now that seems to have changed around a wee bit. Have you turned your mind to how that will affect things?
Yeah, and I guess bearing in mind that this report was done for December, so the world has changed a lot since then. We are in contact every couple of weeks with our Treasury advisors, constantly monitoring this kind of thing.
Thank you. I'm done.
Councillor Daly.
Look, if I can ask Cedric to a little bit more about Ringiru Business Park, since it's a topical subject. My question is about the pipeline from Rangiora Bins Park to the wastewater treatment plant and the demarcation of responsibility. Is that, what are we building and what are they building? And are there any issues in getting that built and getting that consented and constructed?
Not at this stage. My understanding is that we're building the rising main back, I think probably potentially to the pump station, but I'd have to double check that. But from my understanding there's no concerns with that at this current point.
So fully consented and nothing's going to hold that up?
Oh, in terms of program, I'd have to double check where we're sitting with that, but in terms of program, we're tracking well.
And if the wastewater treatment plant isn't ready, there's capacity in the current Te Puke wastewater plant, if necessary, to take some initial effluent from Rangiora?
Yeah, we would have to look at that and see what the volumes are to ensure that we still remain compliant. I guess the worst case scenario would be is that we would likely have to pump out of the pump station with a sucker truck maybe once or twice a week. But that's the worst case scenario. So there is a contingency plan in place, but in an ideal world, we would try and utilise the existing plant.
Thank you.
Councillor Joyce. Cool. Okay, a couple of questions. Thanks for the explanation on the 12.8 million behind budget subsidies and grants. Is that just a timing issue? Because obviously it's not in balance with expenditure at the moment because the expenditure hasn't dropped by a similar amount. Will we make up that in the second half, do you think? Or will it come back into balance at least? The spending will match up with the whatever we drop in subsidies and grants. I don't know who can answer that.
So part of if the Omakaroa Road one, we just haven't met the milestones yet to be able to draw down on the KO funding and the $5 million from Waka Kotahi. In terms of the big one, obviously the transportation contract, I sort of mentioned in the PNM is that the design and processing has been slow. So we've just awarded the resale contract and we'll be going out and doing, so I think that will probably come up to $2 or $3 million. Traditionally, we would have well and truly started by now. We're also starting our capital program as well. But although it's looking like that we're underspent at the moment, we are working pretty diligently to see how we can spell the LCLR with different pavement rehabs and other bits and pieces. So although we are forecasting what we have at the moment, we are actively working with Waka Kotahi to ensure that we can maximise that funding. I would also say on the staff costing as well, just so we're clear on that one, is that previously the old contract was all-encompassing and WSP's consultant time was charged directly within the codes or to the pavement maintenance or how it was spread through. So I think there's probably, from my perspective, a bit of an accounting treatment or however you would call it to show that, because bringing it in-house is significantly cheaper than continuing with the status quo and talking millions. Yeah.
So I guess my question though is, I get it, you're trying to catch up and that would catch the subsidies up, but bearing in mind the construction season is not that far away, sadly, from ending for all our sakes with bad weather coming. The key thing is to get the expenditure and the subsidies in line, right? So we're not left with this financial hole later in the year. Are we? I don't know, and that might be a question more for Adele as well. I mean, how do we balance those two sides up? Because it's one thing trying to get the work done and then get the subsidies, but if we can't get the work done and our capital program is obviously, like the roundabout at Omakaroa is behind, will we be back in balance between spending and revenue by the end of the financial year in that regard? And then I've got another question.
Through the chair, so in terms of the work that isn't complete in any one year, we have that carry forward process. We have also the opportunity to forecast the current year and put anything back into next financial year when we do the finalisation of the long-term plan process as well. So any work that won't be undertaken will obviously, we won't be carrying either the cost or the income forward, and there'll be discussion with Cedric and Waka Kotahi around the work.
So as long as the income follows the cost, right?
Absolutely. So we can't claim the subsidy until the work is complete.
Yep. The other one was, which is possibly more of a concern because that does balance itself, as you say, is if we could hear a little bit more about regulatory income, 1.4 million behind budget, the current economic environment. I know work has been done to create some savings, but that's the hole we can't fill, right? To use a very bad engineering pun. Can we hear a little bit more about that? Because that isn't so easy to resolve.
just about easier for me to go up front. So yes, you are very, very much aware of what's happening in terms of the current building and development space that we have got within the regulatory environment. So across the market, we're probably looking at 20 to 25% drop in the number of applications that are coming through from a building and consenting perspective. So what we obviously are trying to do is look at ways of managing our current funding, which comes through from fees, in terms of trying to optimise what we can bring in. So that is looking at a number of projects which include optimising time recovery, looking at sort of debt management and other initiatives to address that gap in funding. We can't, however, do anything about the volumes dropping. So there is going to be a gap in terms of what we've projected for revenue to come through from our regulatory fees versus what we put into budgets at the beginning of the year. We were basing our figures in terms of volumes around the last 3 years' worth of consenting volumes, and obviously that is not reflective of the current market at the moment. The other factor that we have got in terms of revenue reduction there is that the timing of the fees and charges adjustment for last year was the end of August, before we could apply the new year's fees and charges. So that's created a bit of gap, and it's something we're working on internally around. We're likely, with the delay in LTP this year, to also need to put in some measures to either move our fees and charges forward, or budget that into budgets for LTP. So yes, there will be. Internally, we're looking at projections of what that revenue gap will be for the end of the year, and we'll come back to this meeting, obviously, to look at addressing what we will need to manage in terms of gaps. In terms of managing costs, there's a couple of limitations around that. So if we look at the building side of things, our application numbers are dropping, but our inspections based on applications that were received last year are still progressing. So whilst we're not recovering fees for them this year, we've actually committed to doing that work. So there's a bit of a gap in terms of obviously follow-on work that relates to last year's consenting processes. We're looking at ways of reducing our contractor spend. So we've brought to this table before that some of our service is delivered through contractors, and so we're obviously trying to look at reducing those costs for the use of contractors. So I can assure you we're looking at pulling all the levers we can in terms of trying to manage as best we can in terms of reducing costs and optimising our revenue.
Thank you. Thank you, Alison. Right, we're up to Stuart.
Thank you. I've got a few questions, if that's okay. Can we go to page 40, please? And I know it's a sort of a summary page that's, I think, not that's provided by your advisors. But I see where it has it has debt of 95 million. That's drawn debt. It's got a weighted average margin of 0.61. I take it that is on drawn. That's a drawn margin. And the headroom of 30 for the Westpac bank facility. Can you please tell me what the maturity of that facility is?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I can find out.
It would be good to know that, because that would tell us. And why is it not being added to our liquidity? Because liquidity of 13.9 is here reflecting your cash and your deposits, but actually liquidity also reflects your undrawn committed facilities. So I just say you're probably understating the shape you're in. You've got more liquidity than you can see here.
So the reason that the Westpac 30 mil isn't included in that is it's actually treated like a debenture stock, which we confirmed with audit through our latest debenture trust deed certificate, which got signed off last week.
That's the security of it, but that's not how it is treated. I might say I am an expert in this area. I think that needs to be recalibrated because that is the definition of liquidity. Okay, it does include uncommitted bank facilities, undrawn and committed. The key is that they're committed, i.e. you pay a fee for it. And also, if you see here the Western Bay of Plenty composition of funding counterparties, it's only got Westpac there at 10%. I'd suggest that's probably looking more like, to the extent that they are a funding counterparty, because given the commitment, and that should be added into there. If I go to page 40, where we state on the financial summary, whenever we're using debt to revenue ratios, my question is this adjusted to fit with the LGFA definition?
Yes.
Great. So that therefore excludes their definition in terms of what comes out of revenue.
Yes.
Great. And is that definition consistent with everything you're doing in terms of LTP and others?
Yes.
Fantastic.
We're required to.
Because that was my key question in relation to those. And my only other observation, and I've had some chats with Adele on this, is that if you go back to page 53, and if you have a look at the top left-hand chart, which shows the maturity profile of council's debt and debt funding and facilities, that's actually sector-wide extraordinarily short. Okay? And the one thing I did notice in our Treasury policy, which is in the process of being reviewed, is that we only have one funding risk limit, and that is that no more than 40% of your debt matures in any one 12-month period. But that actually means that this council could be in a position where all of your debt matures within 3 years. At the moment, 90% of this council's funding matures within 4 years. It is actually very low for the sector. And I have asked Adele to discuss with your advisors the inclusion of a funding risk control limit that is more commensurate with a local government. And because that for me is concerning. And it would be concerning also for a rating agency, to the extent that they would say, gosh, that's, you're funding long-term assets with short-term debt. It's not a good look. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Revenge.
Thank you, sir. 2 questions. First one is for Alison. If we've not got the same workload coming through, are we faster at delivering our service? And if we are, how much faster?
Yes, we have been getting some reductions in our turnaround times as a result of the drop in volumes. In terms of the actual percentage, I would have to come back to you on that.
Thank you. My other one was for Cedric. The Transport Agency gives us a subsidy, and I'm wondering where we're at with that subsidy. Is it coming through? Are we talking to government about when it is coming through? Because it's worth quite a lot of money, and it's important that we have it.
Cedric's not here, so Adele.
Through the chair, so as we discussed, there's an agreed work program with Waka Kotahi in terms of what they will fund each year. So that's agreed in advance. And then it's around the timing of the work and when it's done as to when we can claim that subsidy. In terms of next year's rate for the long-term plan, as we've advised council, that is yet to be confirmed. So then we're expecting to hear what the rates are going to be in the next couple of weeks. And there may be some changes either to the rate or to what they're going to commit to their work program. They have indicated there's certain areas where they've previously funded that they may not fund going forward.
What?
That they've previously funded that they may not fund or contribute as much anymore.
So tell me, what are we doing about that to lobby back to make sure that we get what we need?
I will transfer this to the Chief Executive.
The indication that we're getting from Waka Kotahi is that the FAR rate is likely to be the same as it is at the moment, that it's not going to reduce, but they will cap how much they can spend, right? So that there will be a constraint across New Zealand on how much they've got in that budget, and therefore what councils will be able to spend and still expect to receive that FAR rate. Does that make sense?
Right. As I read it, 6 million is needing to come from them at the moment, and we haven't got it yet, have we?
Okay. We talked about that about 15 minutes ago. That's just a timing issue. For some of the subsidies, we can't claim the subsidy back from Waka Kotahi until we've hit particular milestones in the projects. So it's just a timing issue. It's not. It's just a catch up. So we are still expecting to get that income, but it hasn't come yet.
So they're not expecting to cut us back on that?
No, that's under the existing arrangements.
Right. Councillor Coxie.
Just a little bit of me coming to grips really with council accounting, and probably the easiest way for me to think about it is like your business or your household budget. So obviously when times are hard, you look to reduce your expenditure and where you can increase your income, but obviously the comments from Alison are quite valid too. Your income's down, and that's to be expected at a time like this as well. I mean, there's going to be some cost cutting in terms of contracting, but is there a percentage decrease in mind of how much the expenditure can be cut at an operational level? And to Stuart's point, it's a very good point, and it's a tentative borrowing that I had conveniently forgotten, but he's quite right. Funding long-term assets with short-term debt, that is something that could be addressed. But to my question really about expenditure, how do we go about, or what's the goal there in terms of what we can cut? Because I'm having to get used to the fact that, we are committed to spending money as well, and pretty much what you get in, you have to spend. That's not what I'm used to, seeing. And so I just want to get a better understanding of what we can do here.
I think it's a really, I'm not going to be able to answer the question in full, but I think what we're doing here is prompting us to do some more thinking in this space. I think the challenge that we have is that, particularly in the regulatory space, whether that's with planners and the resource consent or whether it's building people, is that it's really difficult to resource completely accurately to what the forecast is going to be, and as we see, it's dropping, right? So the thing that we tend to do in this place, and Alison and the team do a really good job of, is trying to go to ride those peaks and troughs, if you like, through a balance of permanent staff and contractors or external resources, consultancies. So we work, we have to work through that. I think we need to look at where we can cut some other costs, probably reluctant to do that in the space of permanent staff for the reason that the peaks will come back and it's incredibly difficult to recruit to these roles. So to let those resources go will create a longer term risk for us. So I think we need to find a balance of suck it up a little bit and understand where, that's an audit and risk term, where we can then find some other savings to complement it. But I think what you've raised is an opportunity for us to think about that a little bit more.
Councillor Henry. Oh, you.
Sorry, just following up from what the Chief Executive just said, we've been very mindful of how this year's going and turning our minds to what those cost reductions will look like. But I also want to refer you back to your revenue and financing policy. So within the policy itself, it acknowledges that you might have years where you're basically, as John said, boom, bust. And so it allows for us to transfer any higher than planned income into a reserve, and then in those years where we do have a downturn, to make up that gap that, of costs that we've got fixed anyway. So it's the only activity of council that does allow for a reserve to be used on any of those boom and bust years. So that is one option for us. But the problem is that we've had a couple of less than desirable years, but again, we can look to that strategy as part of the long-term plan.
I just want to say very quickly, I appreciate the focus on cost cutting, but I think the premise that budgeting for council and public sector is similar to your household is really quite, they're quite different beasts. And I think we just be mindful of that.
It's an analogy, James.
No, but they are quite different. And I think if you take the analogy too closely, you end up with the wrong results.
Councillor Henry.
Okay, so what I'm talking about now is probably not going to be solved now, but I'd like to raise it now because it's relative to what comments that Alison had made about resource consents being down 20 to 30%. Now, that raises a bit of a concern for me in terms of us being a growth area, and, I would have expected them to be rising rather than reducing. So I'm wondering whether we could have some more detail at a workshop level or whatever, where we can understand what's happening. And away from resource consent, I'm hearing more and more concern about the process of just a normal extension consent and things like that that's happening. And I don't want to bring it up now, but I would like to understand more about what's happening within the process so we can address that sort of thing when it comes to us, because I don't understand it. It's not our area. It's a definitely an operational level, but I don't understand it. So, but as I said, having reduced resource consents is concerning when we're in a growth area. Where are our people going to go when they come here? But I'll just leave it at that. So I'll leave that for you to think about.
I think just the best people to hear from in terms of market and how they're responding to market is our developers. And maybe it would make sense at a workshop to bring some of our trusted developers in to have a chat about what they're finding in the market, the levels of pre-sales they're not getting, and why they're not progressing developments as quick as you would like at the moment. So we can arrange that.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Maribich.
I thought that was a valuable conversation, sir, because back to the basics. It's an expensive place to build a house, and it's too expensive to build here, as it is in Tauranga. House prices are way above what people can afford. So we're sending our young people off to Australia or anywhere else because they cannot look to own a home. And so when we start to go down that track, it would be good to understand what we need to do as we go into the long-term plan, what we need to do to actually bring this building costs down for people to live here. I think it's a critical issue, sir.
All right, I think we've exhausted, oh no.
Can I just say through you, Mr Chair, that the one obvious thing that council can do to address those very real concerns, and also to keep the flow of resource consents occurring, is to zone land.
Then change 92. All right, back on. Oh,
Just about that, I got an email from Kaingaroa today. Some of us would have got that about the 24 new homes that they're building in Te Puke in our urban residential area. So high density or medium density is already happening in Te Puke.
all right, I think we've thrashed that one out. So we have a recommendation on page 35 to receive the report that we've discussed in great depth. Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Murray Benj, all those in favour? Aye, against carried. Right, we've gone past 10.4, so we're on to page 88, the sensitive expenditure policy. Who's, page 88, who's addressing that? Is it you?
Through the chair. So the sensitive expenditure policy gets reviewed every 2 to 3 years. Council officers have made some changes in conjunction with some of the best practice that's coming out from Office of the Auditor General. There is one change I'm proposing through the chair, just to make a minor adjustment to section 3.7.4. And this is just in relation to where we've got a section 3.7.5 which talks about the Chief Executive Officer's discretion. We'd just like to include an additional comment here for clarity. So 3.7.4, the last sentence to read, meals including non-alcoholic drinks to a maximum of $30 per breakfast, $40 per lunch, and updating it to $80 per dinner per staff member per day, with alcoholic drinks accompanying meals only at the Chief Executive Officer's discretion. The change is to $80 from $60. In line with best practice, thank you.
Right, Councillor Joyce. On page 89, F4, and I stress this has got nothing to do with the current Chief Executive, but in corporate life at least, and I realise that corporate's different to council, just like households are, you never ever have staff sign off on their boss's expenses. It's just a big no-no. And yet here we have the Chief Executive Officer's expenses proposed to be signed off by staff, his staff. And I just wondering where that came from and why that is, because it's a conflict of interest to whoever, I'm nothing against John, but whoever the Chief Executive is, I just don't understand the process there.
If I can answer that, if you actually read the policy, it's signed off by me or the GM. So I think that's
the problem. The or is the problem because this GM works for the Chief Executive.
Just through the chair, just for the reason for this is that the mayor doesn't actually have access to the physical budgets and allocations, so it's a physical process in terms of ensuring that there is budget and in conjunction with the mayor have that approved.
So if it's and, I'm fine, right? If it's or, is it and or?
That's fine, I agree.
Sorry, is it and or? And the mayor and staff to do the physical thing?
Yes, it's normally an and.
Yeah, normally an and or always an and? Thank you. You've already... Yes. Yeah.
Right, just, I mean, that was a point that it was a really good point, Councillor Joyce, about the potential for undue influence. And it particularly comes when you're having either, and it also comes with the signing off, for example, of the mayor's expenses, having the CEO. And the way a number of councils are getting through this at the moment is that they're either having, if they have an independent chair, or they have an independent member. Or that in conjunction with another councillor, such as deputy mayor. It's the potential for undue influence. And and definitely perception. So it could be that you might consider, for example, a sign-off on the mayor's expenses. I know I sign off on the mayor's expenses in Whakatane. And that's to say that there's somebody within management that are doing the background and they're working through, and they're also doing a sign-off, but I have a final nod. And that sort of helps with that. And that flow it through so that you've got that. The other issue which I raised this morning, which is about introducing into this sensitive expenditure policy and the fraud and corruption policy, this segregation of duties, a clear paragraph on segregation of duties, because that flows through to other policies where a segregation of duties is extremely important, such as your Treasury policy. And I noted that your Treasury policy does not have a segregation of duties component to it. So that's my take on those two things.
Through the chair, so we would be happy to include a comment in regard to segregation of duties. It has been highlighted in the fraud and corruption policy as consideration of staff, but we're happy to put a further comment in there and happy for that to be delegated to myself and the Chief Executive to enact.
Just to round out a couple of things here to make sure we've captured them. So don't disagree with anything that's been said. I'm a true believer in one up in terms of anything getting signed off in segregation of duties. So the question I think that was left hanging was whether we want to, I currently sign off on the mayor's expenses, so just up to committee whether they want to extend that to another councillor being involved in that process as well. I think that was the only remaining point. And we're happy to add that if that's the wish.
Sorry, we'll move from question to discussion, sorry, but yeah, I would be happier. Yeah, I mean, the one-up policy, there's no one up from James, he is the top, so we have to go one sideways, I guess, and I'd be happy to have somebody else, yeah, Stuart, or it could be the deputy mayor, I'm not too worried about which, but somebody, it is hard when there's no one above you, James, you're the head honcho.
If I may, I would suggest either Deputy Mayor or maybe Chair of Audit and Risk. I think Stuart maybe a little bit set for it. Kind of, yeah.
You have to be ready.
And perhaps both, I mean, not always, but one or the other, on the grounds that one's just been to Norway and one's sometimes so busy doing other things. So, you know, either or of those two would be fine by me.
All right, so we can make those small changes. So we can approve it as it stands with the understanding that there's going to be some small changes to it. And does that need to come back, or we can just call it as minor editorial alterations?
Do you want amendments to it? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
okay, so do you want me to suggest wording? Murray, do you want me to suggest wording? Yes. I can do two of them, but Stuart might need to do the third for the separation part. So that the mayor's expenses are signed off by, not exclusively, but signed off by either the deputy mayor or the chairman of the Audit and Risk.
Was the CE and?
Oh, well, I mean, you can sign off the CE.
No, sorry. I thought we agreed CE signed off plus.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, not removing the current, these in addition.
Yep.
In addition, so in addition. And then, what did we say about the chief executive? I can't remember now. Yeah, exactly. It's probably all done by the PA, like all organisations. And then the separation, Stuart, you can put the wording on that one. Incorporation of segregation of duties. Is that enough detail, Greer? And then the chief executive's expenses are signed off by the mayor, basically.
And a GM.
And yeah, again, in addition, yeah? Yeah. It's and rather than or, was what we said. So yes, sorry, a bit messy.
Right, so my point was, do we need to worry about the exact wording now to pass this resolution?
No, this
Well,
is-
no. Can we have the exact wording then approved by?
I don't think I do either, but I'm not here as much as you.
Could I read out the exact wording?
Right, we've got some exact wording, so yes.
Pretty close. So I think the recommendation will read that the Audit Risk and Finance Committee approve the updated sensitive expenditure policy with the following amendments. So the first amendment is actually around the $80 per dinner in 3.74 of the policy. So that's the first amendment. The second amendment is that the mayor's expenses are to be signed off by the CEO and deputy mayor or audit risk and finance chairperson. Did I get that right? Yep. And then the third amendment is around a paragraph being inserted regarding segregation of duties. And then the fourth amendment is that the CEO expenses will be signed off by the mayor and a general manager. So there's 4 amendments. So you're adopting the policy plus those 4 amendments. Adele?
And just in relation to 3.7.4, to bring forward the comment about the chief executive discretion into that 3.7.4.
Sorry, so the full wording for that particular amendment is meals including non-alcoholic drinks to a maximum of $30 per breakfast, $40 per lunch and $80 per dinner per staff member per day, with alcoholic drinks accompanying meals only at the CEO's discretion.
We're all good? All right, I'm happy to move all those. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Joyce, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Excellent, well done. Fraud and corruption policy on page 109.
Through the chair. So again, this policy has been reviewed for completeness and to ensure that we are focused on the things that we need to be focused on in a changing environment. I'm pleased to advise council that our staff have just been through some fraud training and had their awareness raised generally. But I'm happy to take the paper as read and answer any questions.
So we're going to, again, put in the segregation of duties.
That's right, correct.
Right. Any other points, questions? Thank you.
Corporate boxes, acquisition and use. Council shall not, as a general principle, acquire corporate boxes. That's a laissez-faire. I think it's something we don't do, but it opens the door, and I think that shouldn't be there.
I don't, got a page reference for that? The page.
So which page?
That's in the previous one.
Yeah.
We're talking.
I think, sir, that's one of the things that if you want to look good, you'd organise a corporate box and, or you could make a donation. I think
We've moved on. We've moved on from that. We're into fraud and corruption.
Sorry?
We're in the next report now. We've finished with the sensitive expenditure.
Well, I take note on that one. I've,
Page 109. So, no further comments on the fraud and corruption one? We had a good look at that in the workshop. Yes.
So if I look at the fraud policy, it relates back to the one that I was making comment on before. And I think you could take a look at that as a result. And
John's taken a note.
John's got the message.
All right. So we have the recommendations on page 109. The 1, 2 and 3 with the addition of the separation of duties. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And seconded by the Mayor. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right. So, I'm to exclude the public and go into confidential. So I move to...
program one.
Oh, sorry, sorry, yes, skip to page 129 to receive the work program. So, page 129. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Have you moved, sir?
Sorry? Yes. Councillor Tracy. What?
No, you can do your confidential thing.
Right. All right, I move it. Thank you.
Have you moved, Mr.
Councillor
Chairman?
Henry.